This is Sam Njoku, host of the Ravens Talk podcast. No trades at the trade deadline for the Baltimore Ravens. What that can mean for this team moving forward.
And I'm Kadre Smile, Super Bowl champion. All I know is the trade deadline is gone. It's time to play ball. Let's go.
And I'm Kevin Oestreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens. And the Ravens are gearing up for a big week number 10 matchup with you got the Vikings. And for Baltimore, their injury report is not an injury report at all. We talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens and the Squad Show.
Rise and shine. It's the Ravens Squad. Everything Baltimore Ravens every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of Charm City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Flock together and squad up. The Ravens Squad Show starts now.
What is going on, Ravens flock? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. I'm your host, Sam Njoku, joined as always with Kadre Smile and Kevin Oestreicher. The Ravens go through the trade deadline. They make a trade prior to it, but that Tuesday was really rough for Ravens fans, and that's because no moves were made. And Ravens flock is in a tizzy a little bit from that, but we will talk all about what that could mean for this team moving forward. Of course, we want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. The Ravens have a game against the Vikings coming up. We'll touch on that, give our predictions. We'll touch on whether or not this team can actually function without the help that we thought they would get through the trade deadlines in the trenches. And of course, we'll talk about why the Ravens are so quiet at the trade deadline when everybody thought that this would be the time for them to make some moves. Moves were made, but the Ravens were not a part of it. Q, I'll start with you. I'm sure you were at social media listening to the Ravens fans go crazy. I'm sure you've heard all about it throughout the airwaves, wherever the sports world takes you. What are your thoughts about the Ravens not making any moves to shore up the trenches, especially on the offensive line, something that you were very adamant about prior to the deadline?
So it's nuanced, but I think when you look at the flock, they love nuance and they are very football savvy and intelligent. So I will say it this way. Eric DeCosta, John Harbaugh, the Ravens, they have this, hey, we're going to get comp picks and we're going to, manipulate the later round draft choices and try to get value. And I think this is where it has come to a head and it is blown up in their faces. I think that, yes, they have done a decent to good job when it comes to certain picks. Kyle Hamiltons of the world, the Tyler Linderbaums of the world, the Ronnie Stanley in his prime of the world. They've done an amazing job, clearly, with Mark Andrews and how he has been able to come about as a all-timer for the Ravens. And then, of course, you have the legend that is Lamar Jackson. Finally getting an opportunity to get two receivers in Bateman as well as Zay Flower. Technically, you would say Mark and Lamar was under the Ozzie regime because that was his last draft class, if I'm correct on that, KO?
Yeah, Ozzie was 2018.
Yeah, that was his last draft class. Okay.
Yep.
So with that said, then bigger picture-wise, I think that moving forward, there have been these weird type picks where whether it be a Dafe Owe or a Jabo or you get guys that, a Voorhees, but yeah, you just, he's injured, but we're going to rehab him back and he's going to be our guy and he doesn't really pan out. Or you get Fa'alele and you're just dying by the sword of we like him. It's those odd picks that we've seen, the Adisa Isaacs, the Emory Jones, the injuries that come about that somehow this team, they relish and they somehow are content in those spaces of picks. That is where it's nuanced, yet the fan base is frustrated and tired of said nuance.
Yeah, I think that It was definitely disappointing. I know Q, you and I talked about that this morning. It felt like the Ravens did waste an opportunity. I don't know if it was just me, and if you're with us live on the squad show or in the chat after or listening in audio form, and even just you two, Sam and Q, deadline outside, like there were some big moves that were made, like obviously Sauce Gardner, Quinn Williams, et cetera, but it felt kind of underwhelming in terms of, the amount of deadline day deals that we saw. It was like Jacoby Myers and then Trevor Penning at the buzzer and a couple of other guys being moved. So it's not like there weren't any fireworks because they were. But I mean, we sat up here for weeks and talked about like probably 15 to 20 names that could have cost anywhere from first round picks to seventh round picks. And I think that, Q, with what you're saying, like the Quinn Williams deal in particular, the way that Dallas actually structured it and that deal was structured would have made sense for the Ravens. But the Ravens, I didn't come into the deadline expecting them to trade away a first round pick, let alone a second rounder on top of it, and a guy like Mazi Smith, who Mazi Smith isn't really playing that well. He's not really good right now, but, a technically young player. I don't know who the equivalent to Mazi Smith on the Ravens roster would be, but Baltimore trading for a first round or trading a first round pick away for a guy, like as much as I think the move with it being a 2027 first rounder, if they were to make a move like that, would have made sense. But at the same time, it's not just about Quinn Williams, right? I feel like there were, and we don't know the market. We don't know who was talking to who and what was happening. And I know Q and I joked about it last night of like, there are probably going to be reports over the next couple of days or weeks, or maybe some have already come out about like, oh, the Ravens, they were in the mix for this guy and they just couldn't get it done. Like there are always those types of reports that come out. But it wasn't just about like, okay, the Ravens trade away all your draft capital for, whoever it may be. Is Quinn Williams worth a first rounder and a second rounder? He's still a heck of a run stuffing D lineman. His pass rush has fallen off a tad, but he's a heck of a player. I just think the notion is that the Ravens feel like they have to win every single trade, both short term and long term. And that's been a part of their identity. It's been a part of their long success story over the course of their franchise history, where they've had immense success drafting and developing and re-signing their own. Like that's been a big part of who they are. But realistically, I think that the Ravens could have moved off of more capital. And again, that's not saying like trade away your first, second, third, and fourth rounder. Like you probably could, the Ravens still with the Draymond Jones deal were projected for 4 fifth rounders, still 4. And, that maybe even becomes 5 again if that Draymond Jones pick becomes a fourth rounder, which it possibly can with the conditions. So I don't know who was available. I mean, I know people I see like Calais Campbell. I mean, I don't think Calais wanted to leave Arizona. It would have been a dream if that were to happen, but I don't think Calais was going anywhere. There were reports of like the Dolphins with Zach Sealer. Jordan Schultz said that, oh, hey, there was interest for Zach Sealer, but the Dolphins weren't moving him unless it was a higher day 2 pick. So if there was a move out there for like a second and a fifth that would have made sense, like a Dexter Lawrence or, Jermaine Johnson, like one of those guys, I would have been all for that. But even if it was just, all right, you trade for a Kevin Zeitler and who knows if he was available or not, you trade for a Cesar Ruiz. But the thing with trading for offensive linemen midseason is it's so hard to do that. And the Ravens are in the situation they are now, particularly at the guard position and a couple other weakness positions, because of the moves that happened in the offseason, because there was no competition brought in for Daniel Falele and Andrew Voorhees, and all of a sudden those guys aren't contributing for you. So now you have to try to find a way to scramble and say, all right, we're either going to have to live with these guys playing at the guard spots, or we're going to have to go and maybe overpay for somebody. But that is a result of what happened in the offseason. They had addressed it then, because it's a lot easier to get guys on the O-line in during the offseason than it is during midseason, which is virtually impossible to do. The Ravens wouldn't be in that situation. So it's a bummer, because I think that the moves for Gilman and Draymond Jones, and OQ, we talked about that for this morning's show, like there's solid moves on their own. Like, I like the Draymond Jones addition. I think he can help this team out. But as a whole, I definitely was expecting more, and I think that's the bummer for a lot of people. Now, again, trade deadline's done and over with, so, you just got to have to see how it stacks up. But I still think Baltimore can go on a run. My worry is that when you get to the postseason, is having a lack of guard depth or a lack of D-line depth, or, if something else happens, is that going to come back to bite you? That's my concern.
Interesting, because Black Ice is in a similar state of mind when he's saying EDC drafts mistakes and then has to trade for exact same position to cover that mistake, but only for the defense. Lamar covers the offensive miscues, so no worries. And it's interesting because that's kind of the issue when it comes to the playoffs. It's the coaching, miscues. It's the offense not being able to overcome some of the glaring issues that presents itself when you have Lamar Jackson in that trying to be Superman mode, trying to stand in the pocket and run, throw the ball as opposed to running, a la the Kansas City game in the AFC Championship. It's always something, especially when it gets to the playoffs. That is something that I look at as, EDC trying to, cover up for a lack of, whether it be pass rusher, that dominant stud pass rusher that you could have gotten, and instead you go for values and comps. And that's something that I think ultimately, I keep saying it. When your owner is saying, look, I don't care about the future, I want to win now, like you need to turn yourself into a mini Howie Roseman and throw out your old playbook and get I'm going to be aggressive and worry about all the other things later.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely. I wonder, would this have been a different trade deadline for the Ravens if the Ravens were, let's say, 5-3 instead of 3-5? Do you think that maybe Eric DeCosta was a little trepidatious in attacking this because he thinks that, well, if the Ravens lose against the Vikings next week, then they're 3-6 and they're not really in the hunt, and if we're trading, maybe a capital of a second and a third or a first and a third, then you're in a situation where you just gave up a future draft capital to win now in a season that you're likely not to win now. Kevin, your thoughts?
I would say yes and no. I think that if the Ravens were, 5-3, 6-2, whatever that record is through 8 games, and they were in the lead and, maybe a top seed in the AFC, I think Baltimore maybe would have been a bit more aggressive. I certainly see a world where being 3-5 gave Eric DeCosta some worry, but at the same time, that's certainly not the messaging the team is putting forth right now. I mean, the team is saying, hey, we're going to go on a run. We believe in our guys in a locker room. And I would want the trade deadline message to reflect that as well. And, for these players that are coming in, I think that, and again, I know Eric DeCosta thinks about this stuff, and like there's a lot you have to talk about when you're thinking about bringing in a player. But Draymond Jones is on an expiring contract. You can still re-sign him in the offseason if things work out. Like they did that with Roquan Smith. They did that with Marcus Peters. Like you can bring guys that are on expirings, and then it's kind of like a test run. And it's essentially almost a cheat sheet because you can get like a look at a guy in your system for half a year and say, okay, this is really working or it's really not. They did that with Ngakoue in 2020. And Ngakoue was a terrible fit. It didn't work. And so the Ravens said, okay, we know that this is not the type of player that we need in our system. And, he went off and that was that. But to me, I think that it's not like if I were in Eric DeCosta's shoes at this deadline, it wasn't necessarily about making the big splash move of Quinnen Williams or if Trey Hendrickson was to be moved, like that type of player. There wasn't like a Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby type of player available at this deadline. So I'm not moving like multiple firsts or all that draft capital. Like Quinnen Williams was great, but I liked him at the idea of a 2 and a 5, not a 1 and a 2. And again, the way that deal was structured from Dallas was really interesting, but even still, it was about, okay, could you maybe have found a way to get like, I don't know, Devon Godshaw in from, I believe, New Orleans, or, I don't know, maybe you can play Draymond Jones on the inside and you could have gotten a Jermaine Johnson for a 2 and a 5, or maybe you do give up like a third for Zach Sealer and bring him back to Baltimore, or maybe you even just do like some day 3 picks and go get someone that, would be like a Draymond Jones type impact, which again, if you stack those moves up on each other and you fill certain holes, it's not star power, but it works out for you. So they did address one hole with Draymond Jones. They plugged up a couple with Alohi Gilman. So I think yes and no, it would have been a little bit different, but I'm not sure how much more aggressive DeCosta would have gotten, considering that even when they were kind of in contention, the biggest deal he has made in terms of draft capital during the season is Roquan Smith, and that was a 2 of 5 and a backup linebacker.
So the point is, and all the things that you just stated, the aggressiveness is something that needs to be in place, number one. Number two, your system of doing things hasn't really worked out the way you should have had it work out if it was such a solid way of doing things. Saving picks when your owner is giving you the edict to win now. That's where I have an issue. If you're saving picks and you save picks in 24, so how many of those guys have really contributed it since you got all these picks? Okay, so that's something that needs to be looked at. You got all these picks, but what do you do with them all? Are they all going to be on your roster contributing? And if they're not, then you're either wasting picks, and so therefore you need to look at your scouting department and be like, who are we evaluating and why are we evaluating? Or you need to do a lot better as far as not having those picks and getting more of a sure thing, even though quote unquote there is no sure thing, but there's a higher percentage when you got some guys that show up on tape rather than, well, we're fancier than everybody else. We know that guy is better than these other guys, and all of a sudden he doesn't turn out to be better than those other guys.
You're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%. Eric DeCosta probably should have been more aggressive. We're going to actually touch on this a little bit more when we get back. We'll take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk more about this Eric DeCosta thing because he is receiving a lot of scrutiny, and some of it is deserved, in my opinion. Touch on it here next on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making the late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're back here at the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. Q, KO, and myself are here talking Ravens football. Trade deadline is coming past. We expected a lot of Ravens moves. Well, not a lot, but we expected them to make something within the trenches, but there was nothing done. A lot of scrutiny is being placed on Eric DeCosta. Aggressiveness has been a concern, and we look at a guy like Howie Roseman, who's widely considered to be the best GM in the NFL, and we put Eric DeCosta on that pedestal of guys that I would say are top-tier GMs, but time and time again, it seems that he has been more so likely to hold on to picks than to actually move them to make the move necessary for the Ravens to win. And there's no question the Ravens have struggled within the trenches. The guard position has been much maligned. Losing Nani Madubuike has been something that the Ravens are still struggling with. I think interior pressure-wise, they're the second to last team in terms of interior pass rushing in the league. And bringing in a guy like Quinnen Williams would have helped. Doesn't need to be a guy like Quinnen Williams. Could have been somebody to help with the interior of that defense. Kevin, how would you assess Eric DeCosta this season? And maybe you can go back to previous seasons as far as what he's able to do. Coming into the draft, we knew the Ravens had problems within the trenches, and everybody was a little bit concerned, even surprised that he didn't address that as much as we thought he would during the draft. They did get Emory Jones. The guy needs Peoples, but he's a kind of a lighter frame guy than the guys that we were expecting them to get. What would be your assessment of Eric DeCosta so far, especially after this trade deadline has passed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, what DeCosta has done over the course of his tenure, he's made a lot of good moves, but there are also moves that it's okay to, or decisions, I guess, that it's okay to criticize him for. Like, for example, I put together the list of all of the Ravens in-season trade acquisitions since he took over in 2019. It's Marcus Peters, Ngakoue, Roquan Smith, Deontay Johnson and Trey White, and then Alohi Gilman and Draymond Jones. And while, you do have hits there in Marcus Peters and Roquan Smith, and, he brought in Calais Campbell during the offseason, and I believe that was 2020. Like, those are all really solid moves. But I also think that some of these rosters, like, for example, when you go back to Lamar Jackson on his rookie contract, one of the things, and I know this is before I even knew both of you guys, but one of the things that I talked about forever was the Ravens not bringing in a pure number one receiver for Lamar Jackson and him kind of having to go through this. And, it's not like Marquise Brown, Willie Snead, Seth Roberts are like bad players. They're actually very solid players, but it's about having a guy come in to complement. And one of the things that I think is a shortcoming is that they put way too much stock in the secondary. It feels like they invest almost all of their resources and assets there, which, when you're talking about a team that like secondary is important, you can never have enough corners, but some of that does need to be spread out at a time. But after this deadline, I just think that with what we heard Howie Roseman say, especially when it comes to interest in really big time playmakers like a Myles Garrett or like a Max Crosby, he essentially said, quote, when there's opportunities to be aggressive for the right players, we're not going to sit on our hands. You don't have great success without taking great risks. We can't be afraid to fail. I think a lot of times for you to get to the top, you have to be willing to take chances that may look controversial at times. I won't live with regret. And Eric DeCosta's made good draft picks. He's made solid ones. I mean, I know his first draft class was not, I don't think there was one hit in this draft class. No. Justice Hill kind of a mini hit, but that he got guys like Nnamdi Madubuike in the building, would have loved to see J.K. Dobbins be fully healthy to see how his career would have progressed regardless. PQ's no longer there. Bateman has been solid, not like first round pick, number one wide receiver status, but, he's certainly made a name for himself last season. I know it's been disappointing this year, but, Owe is now gone. I guess Brandon Stevens is like best corner in the league now on a Jets. So that's something. But then, you also have like Hamilton, Linderbaum. Those were both hits. Travis Jones, that he seems like a hit. Stout's been playing well. Isaiah Likely, Flowers, Wiggins. But then you kind of look at these other later round picks. And, if the Ravens...
The emphasis of the other later round picks. Go ahead. Keep on going. That's what I'm talking about.
Right. So, like the first round, it's almost, I did this with the Bengals too. I'm like, oh, they had Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase fall in their laps. Like those are top 5 picks. Like that's obvious. You have to hit on those picks. The Ravens, they do a good job of in the 20s trying to find those guys, but they are so adamant on keeping those later round picks. And I mean, the 5th round in particular, I'm just going to highlight them one by one. All the 5th round picks Eric DeCosta has had over the course of his career. Dalen Mack in 2019, Broderick Washington in 2020, Sean Wade, Dalen Hayes, and Ben Mason in 2021. There were no 5th rounders in 2022. Caillou Blue Kelly in 2023, Rasheen Ali in 2024, and Carson Vincent in 2025. I mean, we could go round by round on this. I won't do that because I know we don't have enough time for me to do that. But those are the types of things where I'm like, Eric DeCosta's philosophy itself of having as many swings as possible to be able to find someone is not wrong. Like I actually agree with it, but there's a time and a place for it, in my opinion. It doesn't have to be every single season where some years 100%, especially when you have guys on big contracts, when you have a quarterback on the contract that Lamar Jackson is on right now and is going to get, you need to be able to hit on your draft picks and get guys in the building that can contribute for you on rookie deals for 4 or 5 seasons to lessen the burden of the salary cap. But this year in particular, you had the $14 or $15 million in cap space to work with to get a guy in the building. Again, I don't know. And I see I actually think Jeremiah makes a really good point. He made a little bit ago of like which players that were, Jeremiah said, what deals that happened should they have outbid? And I 100% hear that point from Jeremiah. It's like, what trades actually did happen yesterday on Tuesday that you're like, oh, the Ravens should have been in on that deal? None. There were no deals yesterday that the Ravens should have been in on yesterday with the guys that were traded. But I'm just curious to see if Eric DeCosta had gone up around for a sealer, or I don't know if he had been able to outbid Philly for Jalen Phillips and give a 3rd and a 5th or like something like that to get a guy in. A guy that maybe wasn't traded could have been dealt. And so that's my point of like, I agree. Like for Jeremiah's point, there were no deals that I think Baltimore should have been involved in terms of the price or the player that were actually moved on deadline day. Jalen Phillips obviously was not deadline day. But for me, I think that for DeCosta holding on to those picks, it's good to do it sometimes. But when you're in a situation where the deadline becomes a luxury, that's okay to do. But when it feels like a necessity like it did this season to get multiple holes plugged up, at that point, I think you do have to start moving on from picks. And plus, they can just they can trade back and get more picks too. I mean, that's something they can do also. So I think there are a lot of different avenues.
I think the mindset of later round picks not really panning out is the elephant in the room. That's my mindset of what are we doing? How are we evaluating? What is the evaluation process? And it definitely needs to be tweaked, if not overhauled. If you're coveting all these picks and those picks aren't producing. So if you're holding the feet to the fire of coaches, if you're holding feet to the fire of the players, then said organization needs to hold the feet to the fire of the way they are acquiring said talent. That is something that is the elephant in the room. We are addressing it, but it doesn't seem like it is being addressed when it comes to EDC and their staff and how they feel they are getting picks for this team to compete. The depth of it all, the special teams, as well as what are you doing, backup wise. It shouldn't be this, oh my gosh, the world is falling. Now we got to do something every single year. And that's what it seems like it is in this Lamar Jackson era.
Yeah, 100% correct. Again, we're wasting. It just feels like the Ravens are wasting Lamar Jackson's years doing this now. The Ravens, again, everybody expects the Ravens to make this comeback and make the postseason. And if you got Lamar Jackson in the postseason, anything can happen. We know this, but just feels like they could have done more in the trenches. And now I fear for Lamar Jackson in this game against the Vikings, which we'll get into in the next segment. If Lamar Jackson has to have guys like Daniel Failele and Angie Voorhees in the lineup. And Yamil has a question for you, Q. He says, Q, if Failele blows it once again on Sunday, would you then be on board for an Emory Jones start against Cleveland the following week?
So for Emory, the only thing that makes me concerned and a little apprehensive is the fact that he had zero training camp and zero just reps, live game reps preseason. So, I mean, at this point, is Failele is looking nuts, and Emory, and again, from a Emory Jones aspect of things, again, this isn't old school way of coaching and or practicing. You're not really getting a full live rep. Like, he's not going to go up against Mike Green one-on-one like hardcore, or you know what, let's just see how Travis Jones is going to do against you and work you and get you right. It's more mental, it's more technique, it's more like, all right, we're going to save it to Sunday, which is what you need to do, don't get me wrong, but to the Emory Jones. And if Daniel looks nuts again, but Voorhees is looking nuts as well. So, what is it? The lesser of the two evils. I think you legit got to put in Emory and see what it looks like. And maybe, what the heck? I mean, one of your padded practices, have them do some one-on-one and see how Emory Jones looks in that padded practice and make your decision from there. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that the time to make a change like that would have been 1 during the bye, 2 during this mini bye. I'd say 3 would be during the other mini bye. I think now your timeline is kind of Thanksgiving. It's not impossible. I mean, look, we all have made our stance clear on Failele and what should happen there. Should have been out of there a while ago. But to me, I think that the Ravens are just they're gonna just rock with it and ride with it until the wheels fall off. I mean, and that seriously is. I don't want to call it the sunken cost fallacy because, Failele is on a rookie contract, but I am going to call it that because of the investment it seems they have made to convert him from tackle to guard, to really try to make it work. I think Baltimore's put so much time and resources into making him into, the player that he is now, and, still needs a lot of work, but they've spent a lot of time trying to get him to that place. And I mean, we know this organization, it's my way or the highway on a lot of different things. And, they make changes and they do things, but, for this, who, with Failele, they seem to put a lot of special attention on Failele and making sure he's up to speed and making sure he's out there. because a lot of people have been benched for a lot less. A lot of people have been demoted for a lot less, and Falele is still out there. So again, I know the three of us have made our stances clear about that, but just looking at the organizational history, the Ravens, they're a loyal organization, and loyalty goes a long way. It's a very good quality to have, but sometimes you can be over loyal, and Baltimore has done that on more than one occasion.
Multiple occasions. Find somebody that loves you the way John Harbaugh loves Daniel Falele is what I would say. That man could do no wrong. In my opinion, he's done plenty of wrong. But, try my best not to harp too much on Falele because, he's not the guy that's being asked to be put out there. Harbaugh is willingly putting the dude out there. I mean, good Lord. I don't know. It is what it is. I'm just worried about, the health of Lamar Jackson. That's what it comes down to because, again, Falele was out there when Lamar Jackson got hurt. So was Voorhees. It just seems like they're not having any type of seriousness for making that change. So I'm not hold my breath for it. I'll be so excited if they make a change. But at this point, it is what it is. Ravens fans, you just got to deal with it. We will move on. The Ravens are moving on. So shall we. The Ravens versus Vikings. Purple on purple. The Ravens are traveling to Minnesota to do battle with the Vikings, who had quite the upset against their division foes, the Detroit Lions, a team that handily beat us in week 3 of the NFL season. We'll touch on this matchup, get our keys to the game, and see who comes out on top here next on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. Nobody likes paying rent. Seriously. But if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where Built comes in. Built is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards you can actually use. When you pay rent through Built, you can earn flexible points that can be redeemed toward hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. But Built isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. I love that with Built, your rent finally works for you. You're earning points every month on something you already have to pay. Whether I'm grabbing food at my favorite local restaurant or heading to the gym, I'm still earning rewards. Turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use that link so they know we sent you. We're back here at the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. Again, we're available twice a week. Today, Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be back again after the Ravens-Vikings game on Sunday. Post-game edition talking, hopefully, about a Ravens victory. But to get that victory, the Ravens have a lot of work ahead of them. The Ravens and Vikings are going to go head-to-head. The Vikings defense stymied the Lions running game, something that I'm very surprised by. We saw what the Lions were able to do against the Ravens. They held the Lions running backs to 40 yards of David Montgomery and 25 Jahmyr Gibbs on 9 carries. So Gibbs had 2.7 yards per carry, Montgomery 3.6. So the running game was shut down. We know the Ravens love to run the football. That's what they do in order to get things done. Q, when you look at this matchup, what are your thoughts about what the Ravens have to go up against, especially considering what we just talked about with the limited nature of Andrew Voorhees and Daniel Falele?
Yeah, so Brian Flores is known for his blitzing. I mean, that's what they do. And if you look at the Lions game, they didn't deviate much from it. They will get to the line of scrimmage and make you think. And if you pause in the wrong direction, then they're going to make you pay. So you're in a position where you need to be on point. So Brian Flores is bringing pressure. Where is that pressure coming from? If he's bringing pressure, can you hold up underneath that pressure? I love the fact that you have a quarterback in Lamar Jackson talking about hot reads. That's something where you talk about growth, like for him and for Monken, as far as this third-year iteration of their offensive togetherness. Because before it was Lamar would get you out of the blitz by knowing where to go with the ball, and or there was no check down or hot. It was him just being Lamar. That being said, the ability to get a hot read is that, okay, the ball needs to get out because here comes the pressure. I can get rid of the ball, and now we counteract what the defense is trying to do against us by bringing that pressure. Brian Flores is going to be bringing it, and you know that you're going to have ultimate communication on the line of scrimmage. Here's the other caveat. I mean, they brought it in a hostile environment up in Detroit. They're going to be bringing it in a more friendly, more hostile to the Ravens environment up in Minnesota. I've been to Minnesota. It is incredibly loud, and they love that fan base. And that fan base loves them some Vikings. So with that said, yes, communication is going to be of a premium. No, you cannot be roly-poly-oly and think that it is going to be okay. No, you can't be Mr. Whiffle and whiff on a block and think that Derrick Henry is going to be able to run by said missed block. No, Lamar doesn't need to be Superman on every single play, and he's trying to push the ball down the field, but you're like, oh, hey, roly-poly-oly, whiffle. You can't do it. Just can't. So the task for this offensive line, for Lamar, for the offense, is being on the same page with communication. If you can't be on the same page with communication, that spells trouble. And you're on the road, and it's a loud environment. And like I said, you got a defensive coordinator, Brian Flores, that likes to bring the blitz. I think I saw the one stat, something like 74% of the time, which is an incredibly ridiculous rate to bring a blitz pressure. So the other flip side of it is if you can protect, you should be Isaiah Likely having a field day because other tight ends, they've put up and they've put up and put out with some great statistics against that Vikings pressure. That would be phenomenal. If we had another performance like we did with our three-headed monster like we had down at Miami, okay, I like my chances. But you got to be on the same page and protect. That is the goal at hand.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I look at when it comes to Minnesota's defense, and one of the things that have been keys for the Ravens' wins over the last 2 weeks, Vikings are a really good third down defense. They're 7th in the league, and they're also a really good red zone defense. They're 5th in the league in terms of conversion percentage there. So, I mean, one of the reasons the Ravens beat the Dolphins was they converted on their red zone opportunities, and Miami did not. So, you have to be able to put points on the board, but not just field goals. You have to be able to put that ball in the end zone. But I think Minnesota, more than anything, it's a wild card team. They were playing Carson Wentz for the majority of this season. Obviously, J.J. McCarthy is now back in there. We know the skill position players on offense for them are unreal with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Hawkinson, Jordan Mason. I think Aaron Jones didn't practice today, but still, like you have really solid. And they actually had my favorite offseason in terms of addressing the trenches, O-line and D-line. They really made an effort of putting guys in there. And so it's going to be a tough challenge. Plus, Q mentioned Brian Flores and, Kevin O'Connell over that. They have an elite coaching staff that chess match between Baltimore's coaching staff and Minnesota's coaching staff is going to be one that I'm looking at, because I think you have a lot of interesting minds, both offensively and defensively. But if Minnesota does commit themselves to the blitz on defense, short passing game, check downs, the extension of the run game is the short passing game. And I think that, again, we saw multiple plays, even just against the Dolphins on Thursday night last week, of the Dolphins throwing it just out in the flat to Devon Achane, and there was like one Raven because everybody else was up the field already. And so, like, that is how you beat the blitz. It's a two-way thing. So with the Ravens being a lot more aggressive, I'm pretty curious to see Draymond Jones and how much he plays in his first game. Obviously, John Harbaugh said that he will be mixed in there against Minnesota. And, I'm curious to see where he's lined up. Interior, exterior. He's not the body type he was in Denver, a long time ago. He's much more of an edge player now, but being 281 does give you that versatility to play both on the inside and on the outside, as we've talked about. So, Kyle Van Noy has been pretty underwhelming this season. He ranks last in a lot of categories among edge rushers, or second to last, or bottom 10, bottom 5. Hopefully Draymond Jones coming in will take some off of their plate, because the Ravens, blitzing wise, their pressure rates are up, their blitzing percentages up, but a lot of that is because they have to blitz since they can't rush with 4 effectively. They're the worst team in the NFL rushing with 4. They're one of the worst teams in a long time currently rushing with just 4 guys. And so in order to kind of beat down on a JJ McCarthy, you're going to want to do what you did to Caleb Williams in that Bears game, which is get pressure. You can do it while blitzing, but you have to make him uncomfortable. And there were open Bears receivers. The problem was Caleb had no time to throw it to them because there were 3 Ravens defenders in his face within 2 seconds. So for young quarterbacks, second-year guys, rookies, the Ravens generally do have success against those types of players because the Ravens defense is so complex. Obviously, that goes back to guys like Dean Pease, Don Martindale, Mike McDonald, etc. So there are a lot of key storylines in this game. I think it actually will be a pretty good game.
I'm excited. I'm really excited to see what they do. JJ McCarthy had about 150 yards, maybe a little bit under that. So he wasn't too crazy in that contest. He did connect with Justin Jefferson quite a bit. So we'll see what happens with that. I want to talk about the pass rush a little bit, Kevin, because you did mention that the pass rush hasn't been able to get it done with 4 guys, but trade a guy like Odafe Oweh to the Chargers. He's starting to have success with the Chargers. Do you think it's more schematic things that are going wrong with the Ravens? Is that the issue? They don't run a lot of stunts. The Ravens don't. There's not a lot of misdirection going on in the front. It's pretty much go ahead and attack the guy in front of you. Do you think it's more of that, or is it more so a talent issue that the Ravens need to figure out?
I mean, I think that they have, well, they definitely don't have that like 1A guy anymore because Nandi Madubuike is out for the season. That was their 1A guy. I think all of us were, by this point in the season, expecting Mike Green to have kind of established more of a role. Now he's getting there. I mean, he's had a couple of really encouraging weeks the past couple of weeks, but you know, Kyle Van Noy certainly regressed, and you know, they really haven't had anyone step up. I mean, their leading sack guy is the guy they traded for 2 days ago, and he's their sack leader by more than double, and he only has 4.5 sacks. So it's been a huge problem. I mean, Oweh getting his, you know, it was never a talent issue for me with Oweh. I mean, I think that schematically there are still some things that they can work on, but again, it's just about being able to generate pressure with 4, which again, they are not good at right now, but they also don't have that like premier talent where, you know, you look across the entire AFC North, and this is something that, I mean, I talked about this extensively after the draft. I definitely talked to both of you about it too. That was pre-squad show, I think, but even still, you know, like Mike Green was one of those guys that I felt like could really be that X factor and make that immediate impact. I don't remember if it was me or someone else who said I had 10 plus sacks his rookie season. And obviously that's kind of, unless he goes crazy, which is not impossible, but unless he goes crazy, you know, he might get there, but it's not looking great. But the Steelers have TJ Watt. The Bengals have Trey Hendrickson. The Browns have Myles Garrett. You don't have a guy that puts fear into opposing offensive linemen. I think the closest guy you have to that is Travis Jones on the D-line, who, by the way, you can't really leave him single blocked because he will just eat anybody up when, you know, he is put in situation, especially against like smaller O-linemen. We've seen him just make offensive linemen look silly. But, you know, even at this point, I wouldn't classify Travis Jones as like a 1A guy right now. So that's kind of the compliment that I feel like the Ravens are missing. And, you know, does that happen in a trade? Is that Mike Green who develops? I don't know. But I think that it's a little of they don't have that premier pass rush guy on their roster. And they're still trying to figure things out and work through things schematically, which is another conversation.
I think, you know, pass rush pressure, when you have a young quarterback, is about misdirection. I think if you look at what Kyle Hamilton had did a few times in the Miami game and in the, what was it? I think it was the Bears. It was the Bears game as well as the Miami game where you could see there were some stunts and games that were played that both he and Roquan played off of one another incredibly well. To KO's point, the KVNs of the world, the Travis Joneses of the world, while Travis Jones is getting pressure, they're just at the bottom of the league when it comes to like just dominant and just getting some pressure like, yo, wow, oh, he made some splash plays. And Odafe is still the same. His statistics are showing that he's still the same. It's just that he went from Adafe almost to, hey, I got one. Hey, I got one again. Oh, I got another, which is pretty much what we saw when he was here in Baltimore. So schematically, he's still doing what he's doing. It's just that he went from Adafe almost to Adafe got him. That's the big picture that I look at, and heading into a game where you're going to have a quarterback that plays with a lot of moxie and a lot of fiery leadership. Can you confuse him? That's going to be the telltale sign. I think if you can, then it will work in the Ravens' favor. But yeah, like KO you just mentioned, Justin Jefferson and company, they are some talented dudes, and they can make some plays in a hurry. So if you can't get to JJ and confuse him, you best believe you better be holding up on the back end of things. So Alohi Gilman and company, they're going to have to be doing some extra communicating and making sure that they're locking it down, because I know the Rams game, boy, Nate Wiggins and company, they got off because you just saw Devontae Adams. He just didn't have his A game. If they were a week later where they went over to London and played and took out the Jags and put it back in the Ravens, my God, man. I mean, that was a slicing and dicing type of a game that the Rams offense had against the Jags. So while you can say, yes, oh man, this team, they held up well, or they're holding up well. Okay, this is going to be another challenge for them to hold up. That's the elephant in the room, and that's what I'm curious as to what's going to happen going up against a young quarterback with talented, skilled players that they're going to have to go against.
Absolutely right. And there's a note from Baltimore football history stating that the pass rush is an issue dealing with schematics in this way. We don't have a defensive coordinator. That's all. And there's a lot of guys in the chat that agree with them, saying that Zach Orr is the reason behind this pass rushing mishap. Now, there's going to be some opportunities for him to shore it up, getting a big-time win in an offensive fashion against the Justin Jefferson-led Minnesota Vikings will go a long way. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get on to predictions. Do the Ravens make it 3 straight wins? Lamar Jackson back in action, 10 days of rest after whooping on the Dolphins. Can they get it done against the Vikings? We'll get our predictions on next here on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. We are back here with the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. Again, we're here twice a week. Today is the day, Wednesday, for our first show, and then the next show of the week will be post-game against the Minnesota Vikings. We'll have all the talks about it. Hopefully, good times ahead if the Ravens were to get the job done. Remember, if you're watching live here on YouTube, I appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening wherever you get your podcasts, be sure to give us 5 stars and comment. Let a friend know who's a Ravens fan about the show. It'll really help the show out. Also, the Locked On Ravens podcast with Kevin O, Monday through Friday. Also during the weekends, it seems, as the Ravens news continue to pile up, he is not taking any breaks. He'll be there, rain or shine, in sickness or in health, to give you that Ravens news. Yes, especially today. If you guys haven't noticed, Kevin is a little under the weather. Yeah. Still here grinding it out.
The show goes on.
The show goes on. You can rest after the Super Bowl is over.
Almost, he is Kevin certainty.
Exactly.
There's a certainty with KO. What's up? He gonna get to the quarterback. He gonna make sure the Ravens Squad Show and Locked On Ravens is produced, ready to go.
I've never missed an episode of this show, so I'm not gonna start. I'm not gonna start today. Tomorrow will be 1,634 consecutive, and I've done this show through worse too, so it's all right.
Holy go! Oh man, congratulations to that. Yeah, good for you. Don't know if I could have done it, but you are Mr. Locked On Ravens, so you're definitely not going to miss a beat. Appreciate it. Definitely know the fans appreciate it too. Hopefully the fans will appreciate a win. I know they'd appreciate a win because the Ravens will be 4-5, and hopefully within the game of the division, depending on the outcome of the Steelers versus Chargers game on Sunday Night Football, the Ravens are going to be doing battle with the Vikings. We talked about what the issues are with the trenches. Justin Jefferson could have a game similar to what Devontae Adams could have had if he had hands to catch the ball on that Sunday a few weeks prior. Q, I'll start with you. Give me your thoughts on the game and the prediction. Ravens Vikings. Can the Ravens make it 3 straight to go 4-5?
Woo! Can they? Sure. Will they? That's the big question, because you're talking about a Vikings team that they were kind of treading in the water. I know that we would have definitely loved to have had Carson Wentz just for one more week. His shoulder, and I guess he took a hit a couple of weeks back, and then it just flared up to the point where now he's just out, and obviously, JJ McCarthy's back in. I think, what did he have, like the high ankle sprain or something along those lines that kind of sidelined him. When you look at this game, it's whether or not you can withstand the Brian Flores onslaught. That defense is a fast defense. They like to create confusion and force you into turnovers. You're going up against a defensive front that's very formidable. I know that if Detroit Lions, who they run the ball very effectively, and they also have Jared Goff, who can sling the ball down the field, like the Lions, they were having their hands full, and the Vikings were creating some turnovers. So that's an extremely good run to the ball, very fast, attacking defense. You got to play with a lot of poise if you're on the offensive side of the ball. You got to know your assignments when it comes to protection, and you got to be able to communicate under all that adversity of the crowd noise plus what the defense could be doing. Boy, they got a young quarterback that you're going up against. I'm going to say it again. I just think that could be to your advantage. Kyle Hamilton and company, like mother of pearl. This is a game where hopefully you can get to JJ. But more importantly, I think getting off the field and not having long sustained drives is going to be paramount. The air is going to be a little bit drier up there, up at that bank compared to the bank here at M&T. U.S. Bank, they're going to be making those dry air deposits. So with that, I'm going to be certain. I think the Ravens get it done. I do think, though, with the way those K-balls are no longer K-balls, I think it can be an interesting kicking contest. So I'm going to go with our guy, Tyler Loop. I think Jordan Stout's going to be pinning them down. They're going to have long drives. And those drives are going to end when the long arm of the law comes up big on some key stops. And Fruit Punch will have his moment in the sun as well, along with Lohi Gilman. So I'm going to say Ravens 28 and the Vikings 24.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a game where it's going to come down to how well the Ravens handle Brian Flores, 100%. I mean, again, we know how aggressive his defenses are, and just for some added context, right now, Minnesota is second in blitz percentage, and they are tops in the league in pressure percentage, 30.7%, tied with Dallas for that mark. So Lamar Jackson will be feeling heat. He will be feeling pressure, but the ability for him to go out there and maybe make a guy miss, get out of the pocket, or just deliver quick strikes, a lot of short stuff, intermediate stuff, work their way down the field. Because when you peel back the curtain a little bit and look at Minnesota as a whole, I mean, it's kind of like the Bears. Like, I think one thing kind of disguises a little bit of the Vikings stats-wise are not as bad as the Bears were. I mean, the Bears were like bottom in almost every category, but the Vikings are kind of more of a middling team than things might suggest, where they're 16th in rushing offense and 25th in passing offense. And I get it. Like, their quarterback situation has been weird all year, but it's going to be weird again this week with JJ McCarthy. And then their pass defense is 19th. Their run defense is 16th. So, I mean, to me, I feel like if I'm looking at this game, it comes down to how much do you trust JJ McCarthy to beat up on this Ravens secondary. And with the history that I mentioned of Baltimore being able to successfully thwart second-year quarterbacks, first-year quarterbacks, and a player that hasn't necessarily seen a defense like Baltimore's before, as unique, I'd say, as Baltimore's can be, I think that this will be a bit lower scoring than some people may anticipate. If I had to give a score, I would probably go maybe 25-19 Ravens. I still think the Baltimore comes out on top because the Baltimore's defense has shown more. Yes, it's been against like a Miami team that's awful and a Chicago team that, was decent, but still like Chicago is an interesting team because they won 4 straight, but at the same time, like I said, their stats didn't really say that that's who they were as a football team. You just want to see them continue to stack. Like all you can do is take one game at a time, play who's in front of you. And while the Vikings were really impressive against Detroit last week, it is a week-to-week league. And I think that for Baltimore, if they can overcome the blitzing from Brian Flores, and if they can be good on offense on third down and in the red zone, because again, even defensively for Baltimore in the red zone, like if you kick against this Ravens team and you get held out of the end zone, you're not going to beat a Lamar Jackson-led offense. I don't care how much they're struggling during a game. They will find a way to get theirs 99 times out of, maybe even 100 times out of 100. But, you have to be able to convert because Baltimore did that against Miami. And while it didn't necessarily have, a huge impact on the final score, the Ravens going 100% in the red zone and the Dolphins going 0% certainly set a tone, especially when the Ravens were being able to take advantage of multiple Miami mistakes. And that's the other thing, right? Don't make mistakes. And take advantage of the other team's mistakes because we saw Miami make mistake after mistake after mistake. It was horrible football. And all you can do if you're the Ravens in that situation is take advantage of them. And that's what they did. They need to continue doing.
Yep, I agree completely. I think that this Vikings team is going to be leaning heavily on J.J. McCarthy. That's asking a lot out of a rookie against a desperate Ravens defense. If the Ravens defense can stop Aaron Jones, I think that's the question. Make sure that Aaron Jones doesn't take the ball away from J.J. McCarthy. You want to make sure that J.J. McCarthy's the one with the football the majority of the time. I'm sure that's the game plan going in. If they can do that, if they can set the edge, then they have a good chance of winning this game. I think the Ravens win. I think the Ravens score plus 30 points. Let me say 32-17. But again, you mentioned that this team is really good at blitzing. Pressure is there. They load the box more than most teams in the league too. So it won't be a jumbo formation that gets the job done. I think the Ravens are going to have to spread the ball out, spread the defense out, make sure that if they're running the football, they're doing it with just 6 guys blocking, which is going to be a challenge with Daniel Falele. But that's going to be the way to get this job done. Similar to what they did in the second half against the Dolphins. So I think the Ravens get the job done. Lamar Jackson indoors. I like it. I like the matchup a lot. But again, if the blitzing gets to them, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a lot closer than people think. But I think the blitzing can be solved with quick passes, similar to what they did in the second half against the Dolphins. But we shall see. Again, I want to thank everybody so much for joining us here on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. We will see you here on Sunday after the Ravens-Vikings game. Be sure to like and subscribe. All that good stuff. Make sure you guys are tuning in for that post-game show. For myself, Q, and Kevin O, appreciate you guys so much for joining us here on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. And we will see you on Sunday.